All right, I think we are ready to start. So let's see who is first on the list. Mary.
Hi, I'm a little nervous.
Howdy.
I don't know why.
You're not biting, just giving feedback.
I also am like running on not a lot of sleep right now because someone decided to someone who shall remain nameless decided to have a party at like 4:30 in the morning. So just throwing that out there as well. My 16-month-old. So anyway, I had a question, and this is really kind of less kind of a design workshop question than just trying to get clarity around how we address color and accessibility in the dashboards. It's working on a dashboard project or kind of like helping the enterprise team with a little bit of kind of dashboard design and configuration. And something that came up is kind of in the accessibility guidelines for UX, something that we should do, especially when we think about kind of like line graphs, etc., is to, and we think about kind of like assigning value to something, kind of like good, bad, right? Like red, green, right? We think about this like red, green. Something that's recommended in the accessibility guidelines is to change the green to blue. Because when you think about color blindness, I think, and Awana, like if I butcher this, please correct me, but the most common form of color blindness is that people can't necessarily distinguish between green and red. That's a bit of a challenge for people. And the recommendation is to change the colors to blue and red. So I was wondering, kind of when we think about the gauge panel and using a gauge on the dashboard, if we would want to take the same approach, and if the same kind of challenge exists, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see the difference between the green and red. So I know we discussed it a little bit on Slack, but I just wanted to kind of bring it up to the team in this forum and see kind of if this is something we want to address moving forward, if there's any kind of like research that needs to be done, and if this is something that we would want to prioritize. So I'll just stop there and see if there are any comments.
I just want to say I'm red-green colorblind, and this was super clear for me, at least.
Yeah,
cool.
I think it makes sense. I mean, this is just the default. The user can then change it to whatever they prefer. So, but the only thing to consider is that these defaults are for all panels, not the gauge panel. So the new threshold system is used by everything. But I think it could make sense to change the default to be blue instead of green at the base okay.
Yeah, I just have one comment. If we're going to move in that sort of approach regarding, for instance, this panel, and that is also if you would look at this sort of these panels in the light theme, how much contrast the yellow would have, because that is sort of another issue then. Because that can sort of almost vanish in the light theme.
You have to go under your profile, Mary.
You can just hit the double T and then just hit double T on your keyboard. It's a shortcut to switch to light theme. And then you have to do a refresh or reload the dashboard, because the rendering doesn't really. Okay, you're an anonymous user. Just open the dashboard again, but just navigate, not really load it. And you should. It should. No, the gauge is still thinking it's a dark theme. Then you can add a query parameter to the URL with like a ampersand or so, and theme equals light, or is it just light? I think this, but I can't remember. Yeah, there we go. It's a okay contrast, I guess.
The question is if it's an accessible by accessibility standards contrast. But sort of on the big topic, I would say that this is something we should research and actually get listen to actually people who have these issues to sort of figure out their experience of it, because it's so easy to sort of sit in Figma or using one of these accessibility plugins and run things, but you don't really get the experience of the user to see what their actual issues are.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this or ideas? I can kind of take this information and I'll circle back. I know I'm on enterprise, so I don't know if we did kind of want to look at this, like how we would approach it as a team, but I'm happy to really kind of help in any way that I can.
So the only thing I'm wondering about, I know that I'm red-green colorblind, but I suppose green is this, very standard color for like traffic light color for it's okay, whereas blue is much more neutral, doesn't automatically mean something. Is that a problem?
I would say no. I think that, I mean, it's when it's not okay that's important, right? So basically, if it's good or default, it's sort of similar in a way in this context, I would say. But also using sort of a teal color where you sort of mix blue and green is also like a way to try.
Kind of like this almost. I mean, this is a little aqua, but
Yeah, no. Yeah. that feels more strange.
yeah.
I mean, I think that blue in context with the others, it makes sense. Like you can see the other thing that helps is the placement too, right? This sort of like left to right thing we have going on around the gauge, or this sort of like clockwise direction of the colors. I think the only place I could think of or the only kinds of places I can think of where just having blue as like the good default color, the okay, things are okay default color, would be if it is like completely contextless. So like think about a metric that says like 32% and it's blue, but like we don't provide anything. And there I would say that if you're doing that completely out of context, then you most certainly should have a legend anyway. But that would be sort of the only kind of thing where I could think where like people wouldn't be able to figure it out pretty quickly.
I would say the single
that's the problem is that the
panel
only
is
panel
good.
where we have a context for thresholds, I guess it's not completely true. We
The
do have it
singles-
in this date history
single
and some
stat.
other panels, but we have some panels like the stat panel and the bar gauge panel that don't have kind of a legend or scale reference for the colors.
I think the question here is also kind of like when and how much time do we want to invest in this, because it shouldn't be probably only for gauge panels, but general colors for graphs, and maybe create a different palette that the user can switch from. I'm also thinking, I know there is a chance to still be able to use color traffic light colors, but as long as we have different hues or different luminosity in the color, so it will still be feasible, hopefully. But we need to test, and maybe we can test with team members who have different color blindness in that case. But we need to try it out, definitely, like a few options, including on what Mary said with when it's out of context and things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just basically having different lightness is the effective way, so that if you can sort of read the panel, if it's black and white, then you're quite close to home, I would say.
Okay.
I was just thinking, for on the backlog, would this come under the accessibility work that we're doing for Grafana anyway?
Probably like the last thing or towards the end that we are gonna do for Grafana, because right now the work that we are doing is to like the entire UI to be visible and not focusing right now on the graphs themselves. But that should come at some point anyway. That sonification project.
Cool. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
I think Vesna, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I have a topic that concerns the nav bar and the states of the menu items. So let me just see if everyone can see my screen. Does everyone see this? Yes. All right. Just a sec. Okay. So I've been doing some explorations of the hover, focus, and activated states of the nav bar. And mostly that's because this is the current state. This is the hover state for menu items, and this is the active state. They're kind of similar. They both share this gradient border. And I was hoping to kind of visually distinguish between them as much as possible. So I did some versions that we could possibly use and that I was hoping to get some early feedback on. So here are some versions for the hover state. This is where I basically just stripped down the border and made it a super simple version for the hover state. This is using our hover overlay and nothing else changes. Then this one has a bit more pronounced color. Then I played around with the shapes and the borders and the fills. And I also tried some of these color versions using our brand colors and our link colors, which makes sense to me. The only problem with these last two is that they are not 100% accessible. So these don't really work with some kinds of color blindness, for example, monochromacy. Okay, so this is not good. The others work really well. Then I also have some versions for a better focus state. Right now we have the focus ring, but to kind of visually reinforce what is happening, I added the focus ring on top of the hover states. So these are all the above versions plus the focus ring. And then activated states. So here I played around with color, shape, and as well filled icons. So you can see some of these versions. Okay, this first version is kind of the hover state that we have now, which is a bit, actually that state to me is a bit more appropriate for an active state. And then making it a bit more visually pronounced, and then variations of the above hover states with the borders, fills, colors, and these filled icons. And then I did some combinations of these designs. I could do like thousands of these combinations, but I selected a few that kind of made sense. So this is like hover, focus, and activated states. And I tried to combine them and see how they would all fit together. This is the simple version for the hover without the gradient border, and then it's version for focus, and then let's say 3 alternative versions for the activated state that kind of fit in with these two. This is a version with this icon more emphasized. Then this is the version with this smaller rectangle around the icon. And here we have the gradient border for the activated state, or we could do without it. Then this is another version that is very similar to that, only the hover state is a bit different. This is a border version plus a fill or just a border for the activated state. Then these are the color versions. So these two work for color blindness. It's just the hover state that doesn't work. And some more explorations with the blue icons and another exploration with the filled icons. So what I'm looking for is some feedback on the visual design and usability of this. Also, there's a link. I can share it in the chat as well. It's in the feedback session.
It's a massive exploration. Vesna went through a lot of options. I think that there are a couple of things that come to my mind first. So one, if something is not fully accessible, I don't think we should go for it. Like those things are not fully accessible should be dropped as a first.
I agree.
The other thing is this is a relatively small element, right? So having this option with gradient bar next to it, I think it's a bit much for such a small element. When we talk, like here, it looks not that bad, but with when there's it's more of a rectangle than the full. This.
This one.
Yeah, that's definitely too much if we want to go with this option. Other than that, that's not going to be very helpful, but dropping what's not accessible and having maybe, I don't think it makes that much of a difference which other option we will choose. Definitely those colorful ones, like making an icon orange or blue, may be a bit much given there next to it, there will be a dashboard a lot of time. So I would also check how this navigation will look with dashboards that are super colorful and how that goes hand in hand really. Because here it is in isolation, it's a great exploration, but it's also how it will look with more colorful addition that dashboard is, right?
Got it.
Yeah, I think you have some feedback that you wrote in the document that was very good.
Did you say Teddy?
Yeah, Teddy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I have a couple of things. So for the hover state, I think it would be helpful to mock up some options where there's like a pop-out menu that might help inform which options look best, especially with the pop-out menu in context. And then in general, I really like the options where there is like a colored background plus more of the max contrast white colored icon. I think the other options are a little too subtle. I think in the product we have hover states that are too subtle today. So they're not much different from just like a normal state. So I like the contrasted states, and then agree with everyone, obviously, that like if something's not accessible, we shouldn't pursue it. That does beg the question of these orange and like brand color icons, because we have a couple of those today in the product for synthetic monitoring and machine learning and just like a couple other apps. They randomly have colored icons by default. So maybe that's something we should address as well at some point.
Yeah, but in those cases, that's fine because that's the icon, like Grafana itself. So that you can still see it. But in this case, you couldn't distinguish the effect that is on hover versus the regular one if you had a certain type of condition.
Yeah, the change of state is the problem, not the icon itself.
I like the version with that's is similar to our tabs. It really helps with the consistency of having that on active state, having a colored border on the left and having a background when you hover, and it's the one that also has paddings around. So yeah, that one.
This one.
No, the one, the two
This
ones.
one.
Yeah, that one. The only thing that we need to try, so active states can also actually have focus on them. So an element can also be active and in focus at the same time.
Mhm.
Or actually selected is the correct version, selected and in focus. So that element needs to have also, I mean, you need to try with the blue ring as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, any other thoughts? I think Mary raised a hand.
Yeah, and Amy as well, but Mary was first.
Yeah, I think it was kind of going back to the idea of some of the icons, like say, for example, that we have for machine learning, or I'm thinking of GEM, like Grafana Enterprise Metrics, the colored icons. I'm just wondering, I think it would be useful to have those within your exploration, because what would happen there? What would the states be like for those icons in particular, or menu item icons, those special ones? I would just add that in, but I did just want to say, I think this is like really awesome work as well. So thanks for sharing. That's the one comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Amy, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, I actually was going to say something really similar to Mary, which is that I do think that the colored icons are the ones that today are colored are a little bit problematic because as a new user, you don't know why they're colored and others aren't until you sort of learn that, oh, this is because it's a different thing. So I would kind of argue that should be in the scope of looking at the navbar as a whole and looking at the states, because the states will be affected by whatever decision you make. And if you end up going with like a gradient bar on it or something like that, that might look a little bonkers if you have a very brightly colored icon as well. So I think it's worth sort of revisiting that and sort of what rules we apply to saying, oh, okay, you know, you feature or you item or you product are special enough to get a colored icon. Why and what does that mean?
Lukasz.
I just have one commentary. I prefer the one that is selected in the shared screen there, the one with like the colored left border, because it just it's a pattern that we have in two other places, both like with the dashboard settings nav and the tab nav.
Yeah.
But so that at least carries that design pattern over. The other thing with the sort of keyboard navigation, or like the focus, if you tab to these, or the keyboard the focus state, I'm wondering if that, I mean, everywhere else where we have keyboard focus state, it's blue. So I wonder if that should, I mean, if we should have that be like a pattern that we always try to follow as much as possible, where the focus, keyboard focus is blue. Like that,
Yeah. I was gonna follow that convention, but also kind of reinforce it visually a little bit with the combination of the focus ring and the hover state, whichever we decide to go for. And I agree with the border being like a pattern throughout Grafana with the tabs here. This is how we now show activated tabs. So carrying that over into active states for the nav bar makes a lot of sense. All right, Lukasz, you wanted to say something? No? Okay, Patrick.
Yeah. So, sorry, my microphone was
Uh-huh.
off. The problem with the colored icons is that we will never have full control over what lands on a navbar, because some plugin developers from the community basically can also pick colored icons. So when we define rules for the current / active state, however we call it, and the hover state, then we should also, as a next step, consider what happens if somebody puts basically a colorful icon there. Maybe then we need some additional background or something like that, or something with opacity to balance that out. But we cannot assume that we can just create guidelines to follow and they will be followed, because the community might just ignore them. But we should assure that we can also display the colorful icons there. That's probably one thing. And the second thing, I think, Vesna, maybe a suggestion to use more of a current state explorations than active state, because active state is something yet different than hover or current. And I think it might introduce a bit of a confusion, especially when discussing accessibility things. So like those two remarks only.
Okay. Thank you, Lukasz. Patrick, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so I also like the exploration. I've sort of explored this before myself, so I'm glad someone's picked this up, because it really needs to be done. But my only thought was that it's good also to look at the light theme, because some things here might look good in the dark theme, but then when you switch to the light theme, it might almost break, especially with the colored icons. And I do think in that discussion with colored icons, it's such sort of unfortunate that we're using those in some of our own plugins, actually. So, but overall, I like it. And maybe not the filled icons, because I'm not sure how they would look like when it's the search icon, for instance, if that would look nice or not. But those are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Patrick. Does anyone else have anything to share?